Let's go from a positive pod yesterday to a somewhat negative one today. A realistic one. I think realistic one is fair. All right. You ready to do this thing?
I'm set.
And welcome on in to the latest edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. And now, George, officially, the mush is dead. The jinx is over. I can now congratulate you on not only finishing another training camp, George, as the Colts Bears joint practice number 2 came to an end on Thursday, which also signifies the finale at Grand Park. Also, I see you. You look great. It means you came away unscathed. No fights came in your area. You weren't having to hide behind Grover Stewart. So congratulations to you. You survived another training camp and you made it out unscathed.
I did wear the red non-contact today, though. But no, if we were right about the fights, nothing made it to the level of Aaron Donald, but few do. But it was an extremely chippy day. I know there was one special team period that was cut short just because a massive fight broke out. Pharaoh Brown was, shall we say, dismissed from practice after a fight by the head coach. So, yeah, that part of it we got right.
Can I ask you this? Because you have obviously seen him up close and personal. You've been in joint practice before. I have not. So from my 10,000 foot perspective, cannot understand it. Maybe you can help me out here. This has been a trend, especially this year, maybe more than ever, of fights breaking out in training camp. I understand if you want to fight your teammate because you're hitting and you're going against him every day for 2 or 3 weeks in the hot sun. I know training camp's not what it used to be, but it's still grueling. And so I understand now when you're frustrated of seeing the same guy every single day. But here's what I don't get, George. Why are there so many fights in joint practice? Right? Joint practice, I know it's still practice, but it's supposed to mimic game-like atmospheres. You never see, rarely, any fights in a game. Why is it the fact that now joint practice is all of a sudden this like melee fest where no matter what team you are, what connection you have to the other team, there's at least like one fight at every single team's joint practice? Is there anything that you've seen that kind of adds a little bit, I guess, extra powder, if you will, that's already a tense and built up situation? Like, is there anything that leads to this more than normal?
I don't think there's any one thing. I do think it's interesting that you mentioned the game, like, simulation, because I've heard a few coaches say, we're out here, we're trying to mimic the game. So if somebody fights, I'm going to throw them out because that's what would happen to you in a game, and Shane did. We don't have total confirmation of that, but he did the universal dismissal sign with his hand. Pharaoh Brown didn't come back in. So, I'm not.
He gave him the wrist, huh? The little flick of the wrist. You're out of here.
Scientist, but wow. I think I can interpret the meaning of that one. But I think there's several factors that come into it. One, I think, is they're hypercharged. I mean, these guys come in and it's massive. We're going to compete. From the Colts standpoint, you're not going to come into our house and push us around. And from the Bears standpoint, we're going to come into Westfield. We're going to take this over. But I think the issue is in the regular season or even the preseason, you've got full contact. Somebody gets you, you just get them back on the next play. You can take them to the ground. You can out there. It's that controlled environment. They're supposed to be thudding, so you're not supposed to. You're running full speed and it's live, but you're not supposed to take guys to the ground. And invariably, somebody takes exception to the force with which they were hit. And it just builds over time. One of those things happens, and then now the Colts are mad because, running back got popped a little bit too hard. And so one of them pops a bear a little bit harder than he should. And then it just builds until somebody, what I think happened in the Pharaoh Brown situation that was bad is the first snap, it was him and Gibson. I can't remember his first, Travis, something like that. Gibson for the Bears. The first rep, Brown just pancaked him, and Gibson took exception to it. And then you can see the Colts kind of talk to him like, hey, we're going to take you out for this next, kind of let you cool off. He's, no, I'm good. And he goes back in and swings at him. So I think that's where they were mad. Like, you can't do that. You know what I mean? But Ian Brown's somewhat limited defense, a couple snaps later, Gibson got into it with Dan Skipper. So, like, it takes two to tango, right? But I think that's where a lot of it comes from. I think in a game, one, that you're gone, that you're, probably suspended. So that helps from doing it. But two, there's not as much exception taken to the force unless it's dirty. And then you do see a fight in a game. Like if they think it was dirty, you usually will see a fight. But out there, it's like pickup basketball when you're calling your own fouls. Eventually there's a fight because, nobody thinks it's the same. That level's hard to find.
That's a good explanation because otherwise, I'm like, what do you like? Right. You see is such a stark, even in the preseason game, such a stark difference in there's barely anything after the whistle. Obviously, in a regular season game, like I said, you remember fights because they rarely actually happen. You go back to the NFC title game last year at the end when it got ugly, 49ers and Eagles. It's like, wow, what, like, you never really see this. But I think every year, and maybe I hope not being a prisoner of the moment, but it feels like this year more than ever, it's like every day there's some sort of big melee and some sort of social media video of guys swinging and 30 guys all together, trying to, having a fight. I saw a Jets assistant coach, his arms in a sling because he's trying to break up a fight earlier this week. It's crazy. It's, I guess, fight night all around joint practices, but maybe you're right. It's the thudding, not fully live. And now all of a sudden it takes one extra quote unquote hard hit that kind of sets guys off a little bit more than normal. So you made it out at least unscathed. Unfortunately for Farrell Brown, he did not last too long in the final training camp practice for the Colts. But I figured, George, now with training camp officially over, we can kind of use this pod as a little bit to preview the second preseason game, the only Colts home game they have. And we'll get into whether Anthony Richardson should play or not, because we have not heard from Shane Steichen. So right now, as we are recording this on Friday morning, no answer. So we'll tell you what the Colts should do for Saturday night's preseason game against Chicago. But figured, George, we could kind of use today as a little bit of an overview of training camp overall, kind of get our thoughts on the last 3 weeks and what we see, what we like, what we don't like. And I hate to say it, I thought Thursday's pod was a little bit of a positive one. Today, I think it's going to be a realistic one, meaning what we saw, I think, especially on Thursday night, and kind of was a theme for training camp, is what we'll see for the most part early in the season, and especially week number 1 against the Jaguars. Few areas that are concerning. Number 1, George, let's talk about the health. Thankfully for the Colts, they haven't had many serious season-ending injuries. Unfortunately, we found out on Thursday, Ashton Dulin tore his ACL. That's the first player that was going to be on the roster and be a legitimate contributor that now lost for the year. So thankfully, in one end, the Colts have not had many significant injuries. And unfortunately for Ashton, he's the first one. The unfortunate part, though, is while there are not a lot of season-ending injuries, there's a lot of injuries altogether that have kept guys out from getting valuable reps with Anthony Richardson. Thursday night, kind of similar to Wednesday, similar to Wednesday, you had Ryan Kelly, Will Fries both out. So the starting offensive line was missing 2 of their 5 starters. Obviously, right, Jonathan Taylor's not been here the entire training camp. Him and Anthony Richardson have never been on the field together at any point in Richardson's pro career so far. The tight end group is a mass unit where, again, the reason why we've talked about Farrell Brown a good amount so far in this podcast and even in previous podcasts is because he's on the field at the time, because Ogletree, Mo Alley-Cox, Jelani Woods have been banged up and missed a good part of training camp. How concerned are you, George, that, yes, on one hand, they're not significant injuries. But on the other hand, you're looking at, almost half the starting offense is getting little to no rips with their starting quarterback because they're missing so much practice time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major concern. I think they're healthier than they have been in years past. Like you said, that on that side, it's positive. But a lot of these little nicks and these guys that have been out, a lot of it goes back to OTAs. When you look at Jelani Woods, he's been out since I think the first week, maybe the start of the second week of training camp, and he was out all spring. So he's got a week and a half of work with Anthony Richardson. Drew Ogletree missed the entire spring, missed a good chunk, if not all, of training camp. Same with Mo Alley-Cox. Those 3 guys were out in the spring. They're out now. They're red zone guys on a day like last night when red zone is what you're doing the work on. That's where they're probably their most critical element. And they're not there. And I'm not taking shots at any players. Guys get hurt. Unfortunately, it's part of the thing, but when you look at the team and you look at the first team offense in particular last night, and for instance, those 3 guys are not there. Jonathan Taylor's not there. Your starting center's not there. Your starting right guard's not there. Your rotating receivers anyway, because they've been doing that a lot during camp period, just still trying to see who they want to go where. And, hey, if we put this guy in the slot, what's that look like? It's what camp's for. But what it means is that Richardson has gotten a lot of time with guys that you hope he's not playing with a lot during the season. I guess the upshot of that is injuries will happen in the regular season, and he does now have a lot of snaps with a lot of different people. But the downside of it is some of the guys you want to see him most building chemistry with, it's not happening. And I think you saw it from the spring. Him and Pierce are still getting on the same page. Him and Pittman are still getting on the same page. Some of that is because the receivers were hurt and weren't out there in training camp or in OTAs. And some of that is because you've got, a rookie quarterback who didn't take all the snaps up until, this week. So I think it's another reason why I think it's a really good idea that they've got him out there and he's named the starter, because Alec Pierce mentioned it last night, point blank. Now he knows as a receiver who he needs to get that extra work with, who he needs to stay after practice with, who he needs to focus on. Doesn't mean he's not catching passes from Minshew and Allinger. Doesn't mean that he's ignoring them, but he now knows my focus needs to be on number 5. And, I think that's hugely important, especially when football's a game of attrition. We know that it's going to happen during the regular season. If it doesn't, then the Colts are blessed, but every team deals with it. And I guess from the one angle, Richardson's already got a good, strong taste of that. But I do think there's a concern there of, hey, what is his timing like with the tight ends? What is his feel behind this offensive line that got, and we'll get into that later, that got a number of penalties downfield on Thursday night? That chemistry, it can literally be the difference between a win and a loss in the regular season.
And that's why I think it's important to kind of I feel like today, George, a lot of this pod is going to be tempering expectations for week 1, especially because now, like you said, that's been basically the motto of our entire podcast this offseason for the most part. But especially now when you really see week number 1 creeping up early and you're starting to see what the offense is looking like, this offense, I think, is going to be rough to start, especially because, you look at, like I said, every position, right, is banged up at some point, and really maybe outside of receiver, like the big top 3 or top 4, you've had a lot of backups rotating in. And you look at the tight end group, especially, with the size and the talent on paper that they have, you're going to figure that that's going to be a heavily used and important position group for Anthony Richardson and the Colts this year. Correct me if I'm wrong, George. I saw this for Thursday night. For 11 on 11 team periods, they started out with 3 tight ends, right? Wasn't it 3 tight ends, 1 receiver, 1 tight end, or 3 receivers, 1 running back?
They're in the red zone.
3 tight ends, 3 ends, 1 receiver, 1 running back in the red zone. So I don't think that's one of those, let's just see what happens. That, I think, is going to be an absolute game plan for Shane Steichen this year. Is you see how deep the tight end room is with talent, put 2 or 3 guys on the field at the same time. The only issue is, outside of Kylan Granson, no one that you want to see significant time on the field with has been able to get on the field with Anthony Richardson. So he's basically kind of going in blind for the most part. I know there's still time left in practice, so you can get hopefully Woods and Cox back and Ogletree on the field. But you are going to go into week number 1 with basically Richardson working for the most part blind with one of the more utilized and important skill position groups on this team. And so that's why I think it's you just got to, fans have to remember that. You have to remember that going into week number 1 of this is by far anything but a finished product. Obviously, you have a rookie quarterback here that's going to make a lot of mistakes up and down. But even though now he is getting a lot of the first team reps, with, like you mentioned, arguably maybe 5 guys, depending on the formation, that you don't want him on the field with come the regular season time. And so it is beneficial to just, again, get him reps in general. But you also like to see, and it's not been the case, him getting reps with a lot of the guys he'll actually be lining up with come the regular season. And that has not happened for the most part.
And especially in the red zone. I think that's the guys that he's missing are all critical red zone guys. And Jonathan Taylor is going to be, if he's here, a major part of the red zone.
Yes.
The offensive line is a major part of the red zone. The tight ends are going to be a major part of the red zone. So that's the area he struggled in the most. It's probably the area he needs the most work in. Most rookies do. It's a tough spot obviously windows are tighter, the field's condensed. He's getting better and better even through the situation. He was last night. He was far better than the first time I saw him take red zone reps in the spring. But it's key personnel guys are not there, and yeah, I mean it's never ideal. You never want to deal with that, whether it's a regular season or it's training camp. You never want to be working without your best guys.
I think that brings another reality to the forefront, George, in that red zone is going to be a struggle, especially early on, because like you said, the windows get tighter. Now we've seen too, especially in the one preseason game up in Buffalo, Colts were able to move the ball between the 20s, and to Richardson's credit, made two nice plays, one outside the red zone to throw to Pierce down the one. Obviously, we know he had the big run as well down to the one that was called back because of a holding call, but red zone is going to be a struggle. And that's going to be, I think, an area where I think you'll see Richardson and the offense have success, maybe from 20 to 20. But I think if we talk about predicting maybe one of the struggles for this offense overall in his rookie year, especially, it feels like, and I would predict right now from what we've seen from training camp, George, it feels like a lot of drives will stall at the 25-yard line, 20-yard line, 15-yard line. And Matt Gay is going to be earning a lot of that record free agent kicker contract.
And a lot of that has to do with penalties. I mean, last night you look at Richardson's numbers, 2 for 6, which are not great. No one's gonna, do jumping jacks over that. But there were 3 completions that were called back because of ineligible receivers downfield, and 2 of those were touchdown passes. One to Josh Downs and one to Michael Pittman on was probably the best play that Richardson made in the whole night. But it's concerning, not because they're having a training camp practice, but because we saw it in Buffalo and we saw it all last year. And it's something that just needs to go away. I mean, we talked about it on the last pod. You've got a rookie quarterback back there. The other 10 guys need to be doing their job to the best of their abilities, because he's going to have his moments. And when you take his best moments away, as they did last night, this is not going to end well for the team. When you're wiping out touchdowns as they did last night, that's how a lot of those drives are going to end. It's 15 in the 20 and 25. He did have a nice 15-yard touchdown run that looked legit. I mean, it's hard out there to tell for sure, but it didn't look like anybody really was near him. So I'm pretty sure he would have scored on that. The only guy that really had a shot at him was one of the defensive backs late, and you'd like to think with his size and his speed, he's going to win that battle down at the goal line. So
I think Buffalo DBs would tell you that, right?
I think Buffalo DBs would agree with that. And I'll tell you, the defensive back that was near him, he was not making a great effort to get any closer to him than he had to. So that factor is going to change things, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I've heard a lot of people say, well, if they get Jonathan Taylor back, it's going to really beef up that red zone, which it clearly will. I mean, that's one of the things Taylor does best is find the end zone. But it doesn't matter. They can hold on that as well. So, if you don't clean up the penalties, it really doesn't matter who's back there.
And again, too, if that's your best weapon, not he is obviously John Taylor, but if that's what you're relying on, okay, we get to the red zone, let's run it with JT. If you can't block, and like I said, defense is going to key on that. You still need Richardson to be able to throw the ball and to have success and score touchdowns. And again, we saw that area kind of pop up, especially last year. Colts too many times either turn the ball over or settled for 3 instead of 7. And that's definitely going to be an area of emphasis this year. But like I said, so far, the rookie quarterback, with the way they're playing so far, feels like going to be a lot of stalled drives for this offense. And the illegal man downfield, George, I think I'm glad you brought that up, because specifically it happened right last night. We didn't really see in the Buffalo preseason game, and you haven't. I know it's tough because the training camps, so the referees, are they actually watching for that? If the Colts are scrimmaging each other 11 on 11, maybe not as close as they should. That, though, George, feels like a penalty that the Colts are going to have to focus on a ton this year, specifically for them. I thought you had a really nice article with Ryan Kelly kind of writing it up after last night's practice. If you haven't read it, check it out. Where he kind of talked about it's like a challenge. Like, you look at who the Colts have played with. You go back to Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz, all similar styled quarterbacks. The Colts have not seen a mobile dual threat in Anthony Richardson in at least 30 years. And so, especially for anyone alive on this offensive line. So you are now changing your entire play style, if you will, because now heard Ryan Kelly kind of talk about it on Thursday night. Like, there are RPO plays where you know if he's keeping the ball and it's a run play, if he's throwing the ball and you got to kind of, you can't go past the line of scrimmage, you got to stay in your run set. It's going to take a lot of discipline from this offensive line this year, especially to hold their water, if you will, and kind of get a feel and a read on what Anthony Richardson is going to do based on what the defense is lined up in. And it's going to be, I think, obviously a big work in progress where I think we'll see that penalty specifically pretty often, and pretty often maybe the first half of the season as you're still trying to get acclimated to his brand new playing style.
And again, it's one of those things that's highlighted in the red zone. That's what they were working on last night. And you've got those RPOs down there because you're trying to get the defense to have some conflict. Are you running the ball here? Are you throwing it? Is he going to keep it? Is he going to give it to the back? You know, those things are great down there to help fight those tight windows. But if the line gets a little bit too far down the field during that process, yeah, you're going to end up with the flag. And I do think last night, I think the officials were looking for it specifically because you know that the Colts have that style. I think it's going to carry over to the regular season. If you're officiating a game with Baltimore or Philly or Indy, you're probably going in looking for an eligible receiver downfield more than you are with, say, Cincinnati or the Jets or somebody with a drop back passer in a more traditional style. And it's something the Colts are going to have to be aware of because I guarantee you other head coaches and defense coordinators are going to be reminding the league all week, the week leading up to the Colts, to keep an eye on that.
I mean, it was called 3 times on Thursday night. If that doesn't tell you the referees are looking for it, nothing will. You know, like that has to scream. And again, it's good that it's happening now when games don't count and you can learn from it. And that's what 2023 is all about. So again, I know Richardson's starting out full time, but the biggest thing for this year, I think, is just realizing what you're going into. I think that's what this pod is going to try to realize is, hey, we're excited Richardson's starting. It's definitely going to bring more juice than if it was Gardner Minshew, but it's also, this is what we're seeing in training camp, George. I don't think is just like a one-off. And I think we're going to see a lot of this carry over. The injuries are a part of that. The penalties are a part of that. The sloppiness overall is a part of that. We saw the offensive line again. I know without 2 starters again on Thursday, but another night where they struggled to run the football. Now, I believe, again, from what I saw, pass protection was better, right? They allowed 3 sacks on Wednesday. I don't believe there was a recorded quote unquote sack on Thursday. So at least that aspect is improving a little bit, but this is all a true work in progress this season, which is why, especially for week 1 in the first month of the season, be prepared for some ugliness, for some frustration, for some low offensive outputs here. And I think a lot of self-inflicted wounds, George, is the best way to maybe kind of brace yourself, especially early on, for what this offense is going to look like.
Yeah, a fairly young team still, definitely a very young quarterback. You've got a first-year head coach. You know, those are things that probably are pretty common across the league when you're in this kind of situation, and you're going to see them. They're going to try. The question is, how quickly can they clean them up? And I think that's one thing we were looking at, when we were talking about the Bears practices is, hey, can they be cleaner than they were in Buffalo? Not so far. But now you get a chance on Saturday to go out there and clean it up then. And I think that's the great thing about the NFL, right? No matter what happened, good or bad, there's always tomorrow. There's always the chance to fix it, or to prove it, to double down on it. So I think it's going to be a season-long struggle. I really do. I think it's going to be something that they need to be hyper vigilant on, particularly the ineligible receiver stuff, because it's going to be watched. It's going to be a big part of this game in high leverage situations too. I mean, because you figure, when are they running an RPO? Probably on 3rd down, probably in the red zone, probably when they really need a play. And that's when you're going to see most of these ineligible receiver flags fly. So you've got to be extra focused on it, because you're talking about situations that at the end of the day, you go back and the 5 or 6 plays that determine the game, they're probably the plays you're running RPOs on.
And two, to even extrapolate off that too, to your point, like even on 1st down, like you run an RPO on 1st down and it's illegal, if they throw it, it's a legal man downfield or they're holding call. Like we saw it in Buffalo, it's going to be the reality. The Colts offensive, especially the rookie quarterback, are not built to overcome mistakes. They're not built to overcome self-inflicted wounds. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are absolutely built for that. The Colts are not. So you saw it in Buffalo, a dropped Alec Pierce touchdown pass. To the Colts' credit and Richardson's credit, they were able to move the ball down the field, but then a holding call on Pharaoh Brown, drive stalls, missed field goal, no points. You see, even like last night, we saw penalties in the red zone, call a few touchdowns back, can't score. Like, even you have a holding call, illegal man downfield, and all of a sudden now it's 1st and 15 compared to 2nd and 7. The Colts are not built to overcome that. Maybe once in a while they can, but consistently, absolutely not. It just kind of hammers home the point of they are nowhere good enough to continue to have self-inflicted wounds and think, oh, we'll just make up for it in the next play. They are nowhere near consistent enough, and they are a team that really has to focus on not beating themselves first before they can actually start worrying about winning games and putting offensive drives together. That's something I think will definitely kind of, again, hammer home, and hopefully it will be cleaned up going forward. But that's another reason why when you look at the penalties, when you look at even just like not making a play, George, you could argue, oh, it's training camp. This is the time to, learn it and get out of your system. But when you're kind of seeing it repeated over and over again and being a theme of training camp, unless a miracle happens, it does not seem like this is all of a sudden going to go away week number 1. And I don't see how you're winning many games if you are continuing to hurt yourself and not be able to overcome it. Again, just goes back to trying to remember what we're going into this year. That's all. You can be excited. I'm excited. You're excited. Just remember what you're going into and don't expect to put up a 35 spot against Jacksonville week number 1.
No, and I think on the plus side, Richardson only threw 1 pick during all these practices. We talked about it yesterday and how it came about. On the negative side, there were no touchdowns. There were 2, but they were called back, so they're not going to count in a game.
Right.
That finishing off drives, I think it's the difference across the league. I mean, the good teams finish drives and the bad teams don't. I mean, it's simple, but it's true. Good teams take those opportunities, those drives that get deep into the red zone, they finish them in the end zone. Bad teams get in their own way and end up kicking field goals or missing field goals or turning the ball over and leaving points on the field. And I think that the league's just too tight to get away with that. There are no Eastern Michigans. There's no, Northwest Louisiana states. You don't have that kind of warm-up game.
There's no Ball States. Oh, jeez.
There's no Ball States, which is good for NFL teams.
I had to do that. I'm sorry, George.
They definitely, I mean, fortunately for the NFL, they have to deal with Ball State. But, but that's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, like, college teams can get away with some stuff. And even in the SEC, non-conference, you can get away with a few things.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get to this level, you're punished for every mistake you make. And if you're not, you bless the football gods and you take advantage of the fact that you weren't. And I think coaches aren't in a position to do that right now.
I mean, go back to last year, George. How many, like, in the first 7 weeks of the season, when 2022 season was basically lost and right there, I mean, outside of the Jacksonville game week number 2, where they just were thoroughly dominated, like, every game they won or lost came down to basically 2 or 3 plays at the most. So in the Chiefs game, they made them. For the most part, every other game, the Jags game at home, they made them. For the most part, everything else, they did not. It's like they were blown out of the water. I mean, they should have beat the Texans week number 1. But again, 2-3 minuscule plays, mostly self-inflicted, totally changed that game around. And who knows where the season goes from there. But you saw it last year early on. Like I said, you're going to see it again this year. The margins are thin. Even for the Colts, who are not going to be a good team, and even for the Chiefs or the Bengals, who are going to be a really damn good team. I mean, for how bad the Colts were last year, George, I know it's not how it works. You take the aggregate for the Chiefs and Eagles game, the Colts outscored both of those teams. If you combine the scores, they outscored the Eagles and the Chiefs. You're 2 teams that were in the Super Bowl. That shows you right there for the Colts, one of the worst teams in the NFL. They, on the aggregate, beat, if you will, the Chiefs and the Eagles. I'm not saying that to make anyone feel better. I'm saying that the reality is, even when you're a bad team, the NFL is still razor thin and still has a lot of these games go down to the wire, which is why we love it, but also shows you how you can truly turn a season around really quickly or go in the tank really fast, because if you don't make those plays, you're losing a lot of games. You make them, like you're like the Vikings, and win, what was that, 11 one-score games last year, 13-4 when no one saw that coming. So it truly is a game of inches. Not to use a cliche, but it's like, that's what I think you'll see this year. And that's why, if you're the Colts, it's concerning, at least if you care about the wins in 2023, because right now they are not making those plays and not putting themselves in a position, George, to make those plays where those games that come down to 1, 2, 3 plays, they're not making them.
I look at the AFC Championship game last year. I mean, that game's determined by an avoidable penalty. I mean, you talk about the things that happen. A quarterback's hit well out of bounds, the flag's thrown, and the Chiefs win. And if that doesn't happen, the game's going to overtime. We have no idea. Maybe the Bengals are Super Bowl champions right now, or maybe the Eagles are, but it's one play. That's the difference in this league. And that's a Cincinnati team that is extremely good, that's in contention, to hoist these Lombardi trophies, that still their season ends on an avoidable penalty. That's the NFL. And I think that's to the extent that Bill Belichick deserves the genius tag, or Bill Walsh or anybody that came before them. I think that's what they understand. Don't beat yourself. That's what makes you a genius in football.
And even go back to the Super Bowl 2 years ago, like that 4th down play for the Bengals, Jamar Chase is wide open. The only issue is Aaron Donald hits Joe Burrow like a half second too early. Otherwise, we realistically could be talking about the Bengals winning back-to-back Super Bowls if the offensive line blocked for a half second longer. And like I said, then all of a sudden, if you don't have that penalty out of bounds, it's like that's truly a half second on offense in one Super Bowl, one knucklehead penalty in the AFC title game. And we could be talking about the Bengals maybe right now is the dynasty, the team in the NFL. And that's a difference between, like I said, it's truly that razor thin. And for the Colts, it's really about scrapping and getting that 1 inch. And right now in training camp, it's not been the case, but that's really what the entire 2023 season is going to be about. It's learning not how to beat yourself and learning how can we win that 1 inch or one play to get it to go our way. Hopefully those are the two things that at the end of the season, George, we're talking about, because that's when we always talk about, hey, the season is only about how do we feel about Anthony Richardson. And obviously his development is key, but his development is also based on not hurting yourself. And when you need to make a winning play, make a winning play. So that's why those two areas are so huge, and why it's understandable with an offense that's banged up and inexperienced so far in training camp to make a lot of these mistakes. But it's also frustrating because you see, like, if you just don't hurt yourself, how much easier your life is going to be.
How much different is their conversation today if he threw 2 touchdown passes last night? You see how 5 and 9's not great, but it's a red zone. He did, what you want to see him do, and he threw a couple touchdowns. It's a whole different conversation right now.
And if Farrell Brown doesn't have the hold, forget about the Alec Pierce catch, tough catch, should have made it, but tough catch. Just even the Farrell Brown hold does not occur, and Richardson's down at like the 3-yard line, you score a touchdown. We're talking about this differently and having a little bit more positivity today compared to what we are, because like I said, 2 or 3 plays are now the difference between arguably 21 points on the board in scrimmages and a preseason game versus 0. That's truly that's the difference we're talking about here. A swing of 21 points based on 3 plays, and 3 plays where the Colts killed themselves. No one else. Not a great defensive play, not a boneheaded miscue, not, a drop pass. It's literally running as an offensive lineman 2 yards down the field than you're supposed to. And if you're Farrell Brown, holding on or putting your hands outside of the blocking area you're supposed to for an extra second or 2. Very, very minuscule, but that's truly the difference between winning and losing. I hope, again, fans can at least hear this and recognize, okay, you know what? They're not making the winning plays. But even if that's the case, you hope that they're not that far away when week 18 does come to a conclusion. We will preview really quickly here the Bears' second preseason game, but I do want to ask you one quick question here, George, when it comes to health, or 2 quick questions off of health to kind of wrap up maybe, let's say, overall training camp thoughts. Shaq Leonard not on the field, which is, you know what? When you look at it this way, I think it's a positive. Shaq Leonard missed his first practice of training camp on Thursday night. He's been there for the first 12. 13 was not. He was on the sideline, right? He wasn't MIA. Do you have any concern? Like, do you look at it more of a positive that for a guy that's a question mark coming in, he made it through 12 physical, grueling practices and missed the 13th? Or is there a little bit of a concern in your eye that he wasn't out there against the Bears? Maybe that puts in doubt his ability to play on Saturday against the Bears in the preseason game. Like, is your concern level optimistic, not too worried, or maybe is there a reason to have a red flag up?
I'm generally optimistic because of what you said. 12 practices that he's out there, and he was gaining every step of the way. There's a little bit of red flag because I think the people who were on the defensive field were saying that he was kind of in and out on Wednesday and maybe was getting some treatment. But I I think this was never going to be one of those straight line, diagonal all the way up kind of things. It was always going to have some dips and valleys in it. So if this is just a quick little dip and you need to, give him a rest on last night and maybe even on Saturday, and he's able to go against Philadelphia, or he even needs to miss the one practice they have next week and that preseason game, but he's ready to go on the next Monday and gets 2 solid weeks before Jacksonville, I'm not concerned. But, obviously if this is a re-aggravation of what he went through last year, that would be a massive concern. So we'll see, we'll see where that falls. I think right now I'm generally optimistic. I think he looked like a lot closer to himself for most of this training camp. He's been in good spirits. Even yesterday when he was out there, he was happy. He was smiling. He was messing around with DeForest Buckner. I'm not sure he'd be doing that if he felt like he had a major setback. So, you just try to read body language, which is dangerous. I mean, there's no question about it. But it keeps me more on the optimistic side of things.
I was just going to ask, was there any sort of visible, limp, wrap, cast? When you saw him, you said the spirits are high, which I would agree with. That's a good thing. If he re-aggravated injury, I'm going to assume he's not going to be bouncing around and happy. Was there any sort of physical ailment and or wrap you could see that, could maybe lead to what actually happened?
There's no boot. There was no, no bandage, nothing that you could see outwardly that was a big red flag. But that being said, same was true of Ashton Dulin when he left. The only real red flag there was it was so early in practice and he's going back with a trainer. That's never a good sign. But it's not like they put him on the cart. It's not like, his teammates had to help him off field. Ironically, the worst injury last night, it looked like was Samson Ebukam. He went down and he was grabbing his ankle, immediately slammed his helmet in frustration. You're like, oh boy. He was back in 5 plays later. So you never know. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm sure he thought it was worse in the moment. And, thankfully for him, it wasn't. But players a lot of times are the very worst sources on their own injuries.
That is fair. And that is kind of the dichotomy there is very funny. Ashton Dulin walking off calmly, out for the year. Ebukam making a scene, and you think, oh boy, here we go. That's a key pass rusher lost. There he is, boom, wrapped up. Let's go. 5 plays later, not missing a thing. So hopefully, like I said, with the way it sounds, the way you looked at Shaq, I'm with you in terms of the optimistic view. I'm not panicking. Again, I would take it as a positive of he was out there for 12 of the 13 practices. And the 12 practices he was out there, George, he was out there. Not 1 rep and then miss a ton. He was getting a lot of reps. He was cleared for contact. He played in Buffalo last week, so he's cleared to play and go all out. Maybe it's just, again, a little extra precaution, especially with him when you still have 3 weeks to go before week number 1. Maybe you just say, you know what, not worth it. We still just take it easy on him, which no problem with, absolutely. So I'm with you. I'm not too concerned. No Shane Steichen availability on Thursday, so not that he's going to give any details anyway, George, but no ability for him to explain if there was just a Veterans Day off or there was just they're being cautious. We'll see if he plays on Saturday against the Bears. But also with Ashton Dulin's injury now, and unfortunately him being out for the entire year ACL-wise, obviously a big blow to special teams. But obviously now that opens up possibly a receiver spot, George, where you have Michael Pittman Jr., you have Alec Pierce, you have Isaiah McKenzie, and you have Josh Downs, right? Would you agree 4 locks no matter what?
Yeah,
so now,
it was 5, but the 5th one's gone.
5th one is now gone. You think bare minimum the Colts are going to take 5 receivers on the roster. Maybe now with a crowded tight end room, you don't take 6 like they did last year. Does anyone have an edge right now? Is this a open roster spot where you think right now with still time to go, but hey, this is good news for Mike Strawn, let's say, or Amari Rodgers, or Vincent Smith, and Brashad Perryman? Is there any receiver you think right now has that edge, has the inside lane to get that 5th wide receiver spot?
I think it's still really, really open. So I think Saturday is a really good moment for these guys. Next Thursday against Philly is going to be a really good moment for these guys. Next Tuesday against Philly is going to be a really big moment for these guys. Unfortunately, in Vincent Smith's case, he's still hurt. He has shown some really good deep ball ability with Richardson, which I think would definitely put him in this conversation. Perriman was hurt and just came back yesterday. So he's also probably got some ground to make up. Strawn is flashing again, as we've seen him do out here with those 50-50 balls, but he left practice yesterday as well, early. We're not sure because, again, we didn't get Shane afterwards, so we're not 100% sure what happened there, but he left early as well. So I think that leaves Amari Rogers, who has done some good things. I mean, I know the one-on-one rep on Wednesday went viral, where basically somehow Richardson gave him like a 35-yard handoff into the end zone there. I mean, that was perfectly placed ball. Rogers had a couple of those. You know, he's shown his speed, had a couple nice catches. He had the only touchdown yesterday that wasn't called off the board from Gardner Minshew. So, you know, not a veteran per se in the way Brashard Perriman is, but a guy who's been around the league, you know, played a lot of football. It hasn't gone the way that he had hoped. But, you know, maybe he's one of those guys that's unlocking things now here in Indy. And if I was Chris Ballard or Shane Steichen and I'm in that room and doing the cut down to 53, I guess a week from Tuesday, right now, I would pick Amari Rogers.
The tough part with Rodgers for me is the fact that you look at this Colts receiver room and how they're built physically, right? Pittman, Pierce, outside guys. Downs, McKenzie, inside guys. Amari Rogers fits that slot mold. And so my concern is like Ashton Dulin was going to be basically the replacement for Pierce and or Pittman. Now you really, if you go Rodgers, and let's say you're right, there's really no backup. Like the backup is going to be like Drew Ogletree, basically Jelani Woods, just because there's no real outside guy you could slide in there and have the size to either go for a jump ball or just like have the size to be on the outside. That's my only concern with putting Amari Rogers as a fifth receiver. And if you're only going to take five is you're kind of tripling down on this smaller slot guy that's crowded versus right now it's Pittman, Pierce, and then depth-wise on the outside, nobody else.
And that's why I think this may be a waiver claim, to be honest. You know, we'll see what happens around the rest of the league, but if there's a guy who's got a little more size, who Chris Ballard maybe liked in the draft or had dealt with elsewhere, you know, somebody from Kansas City, somebody from Philly that Shane Steichen really likes. Yeah, I think this is an area where you could see a depth claim because of what you're saying. That definitely gets taken in. I think the two things that we don't talk about enough that when they sit down to make this decision that play major roles, that situation you just talked about. Okay, what do we have and what do we need? You know, Rodgers may be the best guy left on this roster, but is he the best fit for the 53 that we need to put together? And then two, special teams. How's this all going to work into special teams? And obviously with Dulin being the guy who's out in particular, that's a major factor here. I mean, you're talking about an all-pro special teamer.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that this guy's going to fill that role. They can do that with a linebacker or a safety or a corner or, you know, however they see fit. But you're probably still going to need him to fill a role on special teams because the guy that's filling Ashton's role probably is coming from another area. So you're going to need to plug that in. I don't think we talk about that enough, you know, because it's from the outside. You're just looking at, like I just did, okay, who's the best? These guys are hurt. Rodgers making the most play. That's not all that goes into this equation.
No, you're right. And that's why, like, yeah, I don't know if Brashard Perriman would want to play special teams, but I think if you are him, you go right in Shane Steichen's offense, right in Chris Ballard's offense and say, look, Saturday night, put me on special teams, kickoff, punt, I'll be ready to go. I think that's can help kind of solidify his position going forward and anyone's.
Darius Hayward-Bay revived his career that way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he got to the point where he'd got enough chances and he just wasn't going to make it a wide receiver. And it was here in Indy. They moved him to gunner and he ends up going to Pittsburgh and playing 4 or 5 more years and playing well as a gunner. So, hey, you know, it's not the most glamorous thing. It's not going to make you worthy of your first round selection in his case, but it gave him an NFL career.
Extended his pension.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You know, got you some more money. Darius Hayward-Bay. What a pull by you. Yeah. My God. 7th overall. Speedster. Nothing else. It's a shame. Great speed, no hands. Not the best combo.
He became a pretty good gunner. I mean, that's not
the
7th overall pick.
No.
But in Perriman's case, like that could be a way to extend your career. I mean, at the end of the day, you get another 4 or 5 years on the end of the career. I think most guys are going to sign up for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's wrap up the pod with this, George. Saturday night, Colts Bears in Lucas Oil Stadium. The only preseason game here. Shane Steichen did not talk on Thursday, which means we can now speculate and say, what should we do if we were the head coach based on Anthony Richardson's playing time? If he should play, will he play at all? We do not know. We do know the fact that Matt Eberflus on Thursday said Justin Fields is not playing on Saturday night, which would indicate probably a lot of the Bears starters on offense and defense will not be playing for Chicago. You are George Shane Steichen. What are you doing with Anthony Richardson? Are you playing him on Saturday? How much? If so,
I think I would play him a series. I mean, I just think I would get him out there, get his feet wet, let him come through the tunnel, get announced at Lucas Oil, let him go through all that before the Jacksonville game on September 10th. And then I wouldn't leave him out there long, but I would give him a series no matter what happens. It's 3 and out. Okay, good job. You're done. If you score a touchdown, definitely good job. You're done. But I just think he needs those extra reps. I can see the argument of, well, if the Bears have the twos out there, what's he really getting? Especially if he's got a banged up offensive line as well, like is the risk more than a reward. But I just think one series is not that grave of a circumstance to put him in. And again, we talked about it. You may have to do it in the regular season anyway. Now, granted, that's why I'd only do it for a series. You don't want to put him at risk in a preseason game that's unnecessary. But I do think, if nothing else, just for him to go out at Lucas Oil Stadium and take a snap without a red jersey, he's never done it before. So do you really want him to do that for the first time against the Jaguars? And I think normally you kind of match up with the other teams doing. If they're not playing your starters, you don't play your starters, But I think that matters if you're starting quarterbacks Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. I don't think the Bears are going to look at the Colts playing Anthony Richardson for a series and say, hey, that's unfair. They were trying to show us up. I think they would understand what you're doing out there.
I would play him too. I'm with you. Like I said, even just bare minimum, get him just a few extra reps and get this team, again, more acclimated. We talked about, George, almost the entire podcast of a lot of recurring issues and a lot of recurring mistakes. Even if it's one drive, it just still gives you 3, hopefully, a longer drive, 7, 8, 10 plays to just get some sort of familiarity more with your quarterback, especially when you're going on a short week where it's, you have the game on Saturday. You're going to Philly. You got the joint practice in Philly on Tuesday. You have the game on Thursday. I'm going to assume none, bare minimum, one drive of starters playing next Thursday in Philly. I would not anticipate anyone playing in that game. So it's like you think about it, this is their last opportunity to maybe have, the closest thing to a game-like atmosphere until September 10th. And like you said, George, so you saw how Anthony Richardson in Buffalo last week walked around the stadium and said was it a half hour, right? He said he never kind of does that before, walks on the field, kind of soaks it all in. So even him just trying to figure out his pregame routine, I'm with you, just to be able to put him in the mindset of, hey, I'm playing a game. So you kind of go through a pregame routine that you could try to mimic for opening day. I'd rather have him go through that on Saturday and maybe tweak some things. Oh, I got here too early. I got here a little too late. This is how you drive to the stadium. Like, it sounds stupid, but in reality, like, you have to practice it. Like, he's never been in Lucas Oil Stadium with a jersey on before. Like in a right. So it's like to just
he was a superstar, by the way. I just happened to be on the field for his. I mean, we were talking about it. Just happened to be on the field for his thing, and he got a warm welcome then. So at least he's been cheered by Colts fans in Lucas Oil Stadium before.
But now the tights, well, I guess the tights will be on underneath, but now for the first time with a helmet and shoulder pads on, allow him to go through, like I say, go through the introduction, just kind of have it be bare minimum, a test run, a dry run to see this is what it's like to now play a home game, especially when this is going to be your first taste of real NFL action on September 10th. Bare minimum, if nothing else, let him get his routine down. And so I'm with you. Very short.
But take away the unknowns, right? I mean, any new situation. I'm sure the first time you walked into the radio station, there's a little bit, okay, what's this going to be like? Not fear, but just anxiety. Like, what's this going to be like? What's the board look like? What do I have to do? What's my routine going to be? Day 2, okay, I know it now. Do you want him to go through that against Jacksonville, or do you want him to do it on Saturday and then, okay, Jacksonville's, I know this. I've got this now.
And even to, like, as stupid as it sounds, George, like pregame intros, like that's 5 minutes. But all of a sudden now, instead of maybe warming up or being at your locker and kind of maybe going through last minute preparations, you're in the tunnel like, okay, here comes the offense. You're standing there waiting for, you're going to be the last one called. Run out there. Like, it is something that he's never done before, right? Florida, everyone runs out together. So it's like, just to, like you said, find out even what doesn't work with your routine. Hey, I left my house for a 7 o'clock game at 2:30. I got there maybe 10 minutes later than I wanted to. I'm going to leave at 2:20, for the game. Like, just as stupid as that sounds. And like you said, to take away any sort of unknown or take away any sort of hindrance to getting him fully ready. So as soon as the ball is kicked off on September 10th, he has no doubts of, hey, at least I know I'm ready to go. And then from there, you figure out what works, what doesn't work. But like I said, just to eliminate all of the possible factors that could contribute to having a bad debut, George, I would get out the way on Saturday. And one drive does that.
Where are you going to stand during the national anthem, and who are you going to stand next to? I mean, these are all just little things that you don't need to be worried about on September 10th that you've done before and you've gone through. I mean, there's so many little game day details. Just get them all taken care of on Saturday.
Don't be like other quarterbacks and get stuck underneath the full field flag. Right. And all of a sudden, where am I going? What's going on?
Be ready for that full field flag. Exactly.
Get off the field because they are running and they are not stopping for you.
No, they are not.
Just like a baseball grounds crew. If you trip up, that tarp's going over the field no matter if you are down or running. Get off the field.
Not matter. Get out of the way because you're done for at that point. But I mean, I can only imagine, pregame warmups. What time do you want to go out there for it? What exact routine are you going to do before the actual team gets together and does, everybody does it differently. Get it all out of the way now. And that way against Jacksonville, it feels a little familiar.
I mean, fans, for the most part, not asking for your autograph in Buffalo, right? As the away team player, but at home, I mean, we saw him after the first joint practice against the Bears. He's out there for 20 minutes signing autographs. He seems like someone who wants to give the fans every ounce of him. At home, George, you're going to be having fans begging you for autographs for the game. If you want to do it for 5 minutes, that means 5 minutes early, you got to be out there again. It's just all, like I said, getting a lot of the unknowns possible out of the way now in a game that does not matter. So even if he's not truly prepared, oh, wow, I'm late, or I feel like I'm not fully warmed up, you get that out of the way Saturday compared to out of the way Sunday, September 10th. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, the offense looks like crap in the first half. And you're like, what is going on? That's why. So I'm with you. I hope Anthony Richardson plays at least bare minimum one drive on Saturday, just to bare minimum have him in the mindset of, I'm playing, I'm starting. How do I have my routine set to be the game day starter? And hopefully that is the case. We do not know. So unless Shane Steichen goes rogue and actually gives us information willingly, which he is outside of naming Richardson the starter.
I'll check his Twitter.
Get those notifications up. Jim Irsay, I would not be surprised if on Friday night tweets it out, so he could blow the cover off that. Otherwise, it seems like we'll be going into Saturday unknown if AR will play or not in the only home preseason game for the Colts this year. So that'll do it.
There's one definite known on AR, though, that go back to what you're saying. He's definitely fan-friendly. I mean, if nothing else, I know he's definitely fan-friendly. What he's done even before training camp started, with people seeing him downtown, I think he's a guy that fans are going to fall in love with real quick.
He gave away his cleats to a fan after practice. I just hope if he's going to do that on Saturday, do it after the game. Don't give away your cleats before the game.
Or during.
That could be interesting.
Dwayne Haskins, who was taking a selfie and didn't come back on the field. So, you never know what's going to happen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, learn that, too. If you're going to be fan-friendly after the game, yeah, please do not be taking selfies after you think they won, and all of a sudden you're trying to take a knee, and where's AR? Where's number 5? Gardner, get out there. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's a scramble mode because Anthony Richardson is in the stands, signing autographs, kissing babies, shaking hands. All learning experience, George. All a learning experience. So you'll be back, right, in Lucas Oil Stadium, back like you never left?
Yep. Trying to forget the last time I was there, but back again. Well, not the last time I was there. The last time I was there, AR was there. But the last time I was there for a game, we're not going to talk about that.
It was a celebratory pod, at least for me. I thought the Colts were getting bright selling after that colossal loss. We know that did not happen, in fact. But that was a weird I should say post game podcast finale. That was a weird one.
It was a game that allowed Anthony Richardson to be debated about starting this game on Saturday. So
that is true. That is true. So we go back. Feels like we never left. That game feels like yesterday with Davis Mills heaving the ball down the field. Just like that, George. We are back, baby. So we will be back, speaking of which, on Sunday morning. Wrap up preseason game number 2. Get you set a little bit for Eagles joint practice later in the week as training camp has come to a conclusion. So check us out Sunday, wherever you get your pods, Blue Horseshoe Podcast, and on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Pod. Make sure you subscribe so you can see our beautiful faces each and every show. All right, we'll talk to you on Sunday morning, George, right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.